Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, the 14th of April 1891 to the 6th of December 1956, was an Indian jurist, economist, social reformer and political leader who headed the committee drafting the Constitution of India from the Constituent Assembly debates, served as Law and Justice Minister in the first cabinet of Jawaharlal Nehru, and inspired the Dalit Buddhist movement after renouncing Hinduism. Ambedkar graduated from Elphinstone College, University of Bombay, and studied economics at Columbia University and the London School of Economics, receiving doctorates in 1927 and 1923 respectively, and was among a handful of Indian students to have done so at either institution in the 1920s. He also trained in the law at Gray's Inn, London. In his early career, he was an economist, professor, and lawyer. His later life was marked by his political activities. He became involved in campaigning and negotiations for India's independence, publishing journals, advocating political rights and social freedom for Dalits, and contributing significantly to the establishment of the State of India. In 1956, he converted to Buddhism, initiating mass conversions of Dalits. In 1990, the Bharat Ratna, India's highest civilian award, was posthumously conferred on Ambedkar. The salutation Jaya Bhim used by followers honors him. He is also referred to by the honorific Baba Saheb. Ambedkar was born on the 14th of April 1891 in the town and military cantonment of Mahor, now officially known as Dr. Ambedkar Nagar, now in Madhya Pradesh. He was the 14th and last child of Ramji Maloji Sakpal, an army officer who held the rank of Subedar, and Bhimabai Sakpal, daughter of Laxman Ambedkar. His family was of Marathi background from the town of Ambedkar, Mandangad Taluka, in Ratnagiri district of modern-day Maharashtra. Ambedkar was born into a Mahar Dalit caste, who were treated as untouchables and subjected to socio-economic discrimination. Ambedkar's ancestors had long worked for the army of the British East India Company, and his father served in the British Indian Army at the Mahor cantonment. Although they attended school, Ambedkar and other untouchable children were segregated and given little attention or help by teachers. They were not allowed to sit inside the class. When they needed to drink water, someone from a higher caste had to pour that water from a height, as they were not allowed to touch either the water or the vessel that contained it. This task was usually performed for the young Ambedkar by the school peon, and if the peon was not available, then he had to go without water. He described the situation later in his writings as, "No peon, no water." He was required to sit on a gunny sack which he had to take home with him. Ramji Sakpal retired in 1894 and the family moved to Satara 2 years later. Shortly after their move, Ambedkar's mother died. The children were cared for by their paternal aunt and lived in difficult circumstances. 3 sons, Balaram, Anandrav and Bhimrao, and 2 daughters, Manjula and Tulasa, of the Ambedkars survived them. Of his brothers and sisters, only Ambedkar passed his examinations and went to high school. His original surname was Sakpal, but his father registered his name as Ambedkar in school, meaning he comes from his native village, Ambedkar, in Ratnagiri district. His Marathi Brahmin teacher, Krishnji Keshav Ambedkar, changed his surname from Ambedkar to his own surname, Ambedkar, in school records. In 1897, Ambedkar's family moved to Mumbai, where Ambedkar became the only untouchable enrolled at Elphinstone High School. In 1906, when he was about 15 years old, he married a 9-year-old girl, Ramabai. The match, per the customs prevailing at that time, was arranged by the couple's parents. In 1907, he passed his matriculation examination, and in the following year he entered Elphinstone College, which was affiliated to the University of Bombay, becoming, according to him, the first from his Maha caste to do so. When he passed his English 4th standard examinations, the people of his community wanted to celebrate because they considered that he had reached great heights, which he says was hardly an occasion compared to the state of education in other communities. A public ceremony was evoked to celebrate his success by the community, and it was at this occasion that he was presented with a biography of the Buddha by Dada Keluskar, the author and a family friend. By 1912, he obtained his degree in economics and political science from Bombay University, and prepared to take up employment with the Baroda state government. His wife had just moved his young family and started work when he had to quickly return to Mumbai to see his ailing father, who died on the 2nd of February 1913. In 1913, at the age of 22, Ambedkar was awarded a Baroda State Scholarship of £11.50 per month for 3 years under a scheme established by Sayajirao Gaikwad III, Gaikwad of Baroda, that was designed to provide opportunities for postgraduate education at Columbia University in New York City. Soon after arriving there, he settled in rooms at Livingston Hall with Naval Bhatena, a Parsi who was to be a lifelong friend. He passed his MA exam in June 1915, majoring in economics and other subjects of sociology, history, philosophy, and anthropology. He presented a thesis, Ancient Indian Commerce. Ambedkar was influenced by John Dewey and his work on democracy. In 1916, he completed his second master's thesis, National Dividend of India, a historic and analytical study. For a second MA on the 9th of May, he presented the paper Castes in India, their mechanism, genesis and development before a seminar conducted by the anthropologist Alexander Goldenweiser. Ambedkar received his PhD degree in economics at Columbia in 1927. In October 1916, he enrolled for the bar course at Gray's Inn, and at the same time enrolled at the London School of Economics, where he started working on a doctoral thesis. In June 1917, he returned to India because his scholarship from Baroda ended. His book collection was dispatched on a different ship from the one he was on, and that ship was torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine. He got permission to return to London to submit his thesis within 4 years. He returned at the first opportunity, and completed a master's degree in 1921. His thesis was on the problem of the rupee, its origin and its solution. In 1923, he completed a DSc in economics, which was awarded from University of London, and the same year he was called to the bar by Gray's Inn. As Ambedkar was educated by the princely state of Baroda, he was bound to serve it. He was appointed military secretary to the Gaikwad but had to quit in a short time. He described the incident in his autobiography, Waiting for a Visa. Thereafter, he tried to find ways to make a living for his growing family. He worked as a private tutor, as an accountant, and established an investment consulting business, but it failed when his clients learned that he was an untouchable. In 1918, he became professor of political economy in the Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics in Mumbai. Although he was successful with the students, other professors objected to his sharing a drinking water jug with them. Ambedkar had been invited to testify before the Southborough Committee, which was preparing the Government of India Act 1919. At this hearing, Ambedkar argued for creating separate electorates and reservations for untouchables and other religious communities. In 1920, he began the publication of the weekly Muknaik, Leader of the Silent, in Mumbai with the help of Shahu of Kolhapur, that is, Shahu IV 1874-1922. Ambedkar went on to work as a legal professional. In 1926, he successfully defended 3 non-Brahmin leaders who had accused the Brahmin community of ruining India and were then subsequently sued for libel. Dhananjay Keer notes, the victory was resounding, both socially and individually, for the clients and the doctor. While practicing law in the Bombay High Court, he tried to promote education to untouchables and uplift them. His first organized attempt was his establishment of the central institution Bahishkrit Hitakarini Sabha, intended to promote education and socio-economic improvement, as well as the welfare of outcasts, at the time referred to as depressed classes. For the defense of Dalit rights, he started many periodicals like Mook Nayak, Bahishkrit Bharat, and Equality Janta. He was appointed to the Bombay Presidency Committee to work with the All-European Simon Commission in 1925. This commission had sparked great protests across India, and while its report was ignored by most Indians, Ambedkar himself wrote a separate set of recommendations for the future Constitution of India. By 1927, Ambedkar had decided to launch active movements against untouchability. He began with public movements and marches to open up public drinking water resources. He also began a struggle for the right to enter Hindu temples. He led a satyagraha in Mahad to fight for the right of the untouchable community to draw water from the main water tank of the town. In a conference in late 1927, Ambedkar publicly condemned the classic Hindu text, the Manusmriti laws of Manu, for ideologically justifying caste discrimination and untouchability, and he ceremonially burnt copies of the ancient text. On the 25th of December 1927, he led thousands of followers to burn copies of Manusmriti. Thus annually the 25th of December is celebrated as Manusmriti Dahan Din, Manusmriti Burning Day, by Ambedkarites and Dalits. In 1930, Ambedkar launched the Kalaram Temple movement after 3 months of preparation. About 15,000 volunteers assembled at Kalaram Temple Satyagraha, making one of the greatest processions of Nashik. The procession was headed by a military band, and a batch of scouts, women and men walked with discipline, order and determination to see the god for the first time. When they reached the gates were closed by Brahmin authorities. In 1932, the British colonial government announced the formation of a separate electorate for depressed classes in the communal award. Mahatma Gandhi fiercely opposed a separate electorate for untouchables, saying he feared that such an arrangement would divide the Hindu community. Gandhi protested by fasting while imprisoned in the Yerwada Central Jail of Pune. Following the fast, congressional politicians and activists such as Madan Mohan Malaviya and Palvankar Balu organized joint meetings with Ambedkar and his supporters at Yerwada. On the 25th of September 1932, the agreement, known as the Pune Pact, was signed between Ambedkar, on behalf of the depressed classes among Hindus, and Madan Mohan Malaviya, on behalf of the other Hindus. The agreement gave reserved seats for the depressed classes in the provisional legislatures within the general electorate. Due to the pact, the depressed class received 148 seats in the legislature instead of the 71, as allocated in the communal award proposed earlier by the colonial government under Prime Minister Ramsay MacDonald. The text used the term depressed classes to denote untouchables among Hindus who were later called scheduled castes and scheduled tribes under the India Act 1935 and the later Indian Constitution of 1950. In the Pune Pact, a unified electorate was in principle formed, but primary and secondary elections allowed untouchables in practice to choose their own candidates. In 1935, Ambedkar was appointed principal of the Government Law College, Bombay, a position he held for 2 years. He also served as the chairman of governing body of Ramjas College, University of Delhi, after the death of its founder Sri Rai Kedarnath. Settling in Bombay, today called Mumbai, Ambedkar oversaw the construction of a house and stocked his personal library with more than 50,000 books. His wife Ramabai died after a long illness the same year. It had been her long-standing wish to go on a pilgrimage to Pandharpur, but Ambedkar had refused to let her go, telling her that he would create a new Pandharpur for her instead of Hinduism's Pandharpur, which treated them as untouchables. At the Yola Conversion Conference on the 13th of October in Nasik, Ambedkar announced his intention to convert to a different religion and exhorted his followers to leave Hinduism. He would repeat his message at many public meetings across India. In 1936, Ambedkar founded the Independent Labour Party, which contested the 1937 Bombay election to the Central Legislative Assembly for the 13 reserved and 4 general seats, and secured 11 and 3 seats respectively. Ambedkar published his book Annihilation of Caste on the 15th of May 1936. It strongly criticized Hindu orthodox religious leaders and the caste system in general, and included a rebuke of Gandhi on the subject. Later, in a 1955 BBC interview, he accused Gandhi of writing in opposition of the caste system in English language papers while writing in support of it in Gujarati language papers. During this time, Ambedkar also fought against the khoti system prevalent in Konkan, where courts, or government revenue collectors, regularly exploited farmers and tenants. In 1937, Ambedkar tabled a bill in the Bombay Legislative Assembly aimed at abolishing the khoti system by creating a direct relationship between government and farmers. Ambedkar served on the Defense Advisory Committee and the Viceroy's Executive Council as Minister for Labour. Before the Day of Deliverance events, Ambedkar stated that he was interested in participating. I read Mr. Jinnah's statement and I felt ashamed to have allowed him to steal a march over me and rob me of the language and the sentiment which I, more than Mr. Jinnah, was entitled to use. He went on to suggest that the communities he worked with were 20 times more oppressed by Congress policies than were Indian Muslims. He clarified that he was criticizing Congress, and not all Hindus. Jinnah and Ambedkar jointly addressed the heavily attended Day of Deliverance event in Bindi Bazaar, Bombay, where both expressed fiery criticisms of the Congress party, and according to one observer, suggested that Islam and Hinduism were irreconcilable. After the Lahore Resolution 1940 of the Muslim League demanding Pakistan, Ambedkar wrote a 400-page tract titled Thoughts on Pakistan, which analyzed the concept of Pakistan in all its aspects. Ambedkar argued that the Hindus should concede Pakistan to the Muslims. He proposed that the provincial boundaries of Punjab and Bengal should be redrawn to separate the Muslim and non-Muslim majority parts. He thought the Muslims could have no objection to redrawing provincial boundaries. If they did not quite understand the nature of their own demand. Scholar Venkat Dhulipala states that Thoughts on Pakistan rocked Indian politics for a decade. It determined the course of dialogue between the Muslim League and the Indian National Congress, paving the way for the partition of India. In his work Who Were the Shudras, Ambedkar tried to explain the formation of untouchables. He saw Shudras and Ati-Shudras, who form the lowest caste in the ritual hierarchy of the caste system, as separate from untouchables. Ambedkar oversaw the transformation of his political party into the Scheduled Castes Federation, although it performed poorly in the 1946 elections for Constituent Assembly of India. Later he was elected into the Constituent Assembly of Bengal, where Muslim League was in power. Ambedkar contested in the Bombay North First Indian General Election of 1952, but lost to his former assistant and Congress party candidate Narayan Kajrolkar. Ambedkar became a member of Rajya Sabha, probably an appointed member. He tried to enter Lok Sabha again in the by-election of 1954 from Bhandara, but he placed third. The Congress party won. By the time of the second general election in 1957, Ambedkar had died. Ambedkar also criticized Islamic practice in South Asia. While justifying the partition of India, he condemned child marriage and the mistreatment of women in Muslim society. No words can adequately express the great and many evils of polygamy and concubinage, and especially as a source of misery to a Muslim woman. Take the caste system. Everybody infers that Islam must be free from slavery and caste. While slavery existed, much of its support was derived from Islam and Islamic countries. While the prescriptions by the Prophet regarding the just and humane treatment of slaves contained in the Quran are praiseworthy, there is nothing whatever in Islam that lends support to the abolition of this curse. But if slavery has gone, caste among Muslims has remained. Upon India's independence on the 15th of August 1947, the new Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru invited Ambedkar to serve as the Dominion of India's Law Minister. 2 weeks later, he was appointed chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution for the future Republic of India. Indian Constitution guarantees and protections for a wide range of civil liberties for individual citizens, including freedom of religion, the abolition of untouchability, and the outlawing of all forms of discrimination. Ambedkar argued for extensive economic and social rights for women, and won the Assembly's support for introducing a system of reservations of jobs in the civil services, schools and colleges for members of scheduled castes and scheduled tribes and other backward class, a system akin to affirmative action. India's lawmakers hoped to eradicate the socio-economic inequalities and lack of opportunities for India's depressed classes through these measures. The Constitution was adopted on the 26th of November 1949 by the Constituent Assembly. Ambedkar was the first Indian to pursue a doctorate in economics abroad. He argued that industrialization and agricultural growth could enhance the Indian economy. He stressed investment in agriculture as the primary industry of India. According to Sharad Pawar, Ambedkar's vision helped the government to achieve its food security goal. Ambedkar advocated national economic and social development, stressing education, public hygiene, community health, residential facilities as the basic amenities. His DSc thesis, The Problem of the Rupee, Its Origin and Solution, 1923, examines the causes for the rupee's fall in value. In this dissertation, he argued in favor of a gold standard in modified form, and was opposed to the gold exchange standard favored by Keynes in his treatise Indian Currency and Finance, 1909, claiming it was less stable. He favored the stoppage of all further coinage of the rupee and the minting of a gold coin, which he believed would fix currency rates and prices. He also analyzed revenue in his PhD dissertation The Evolution of Provincial Finance in British India. In this work, he analyzed the various systems used by the British colonial government to manage finances in India. His views on finance were that governments should ensure their expenditures have faithfulness, wisdom, and economy. Faithfulness, meaning governments should use money as nearly as possible to the original intentions of spending the money in the first place. Wisdom, meaning it should be used as well as possible for the public good, and economy, meaning the funds should be used so that the maximum value can be extracted from them. In 1951, Ambedkar established the Finance Commission of India. He opposed income tax for low-income groups. He contributed in land revenue tax and excise duty policies to stabilize the economy. He played an important role in land reform and the state economic development. According to him, the caste system, due to its division of laborers and hierarchical nature, impedes movement of labor, higher castes would not do lower caste occupations, and movement of capital, assuming investors would invest first in their own caste occupation. His theory of state socialism had 3 points: state ownership of agricultural land, the maintenance of resources for production by the state, and a just distribution of these resources to the population. He emphasized a free economy with a stable rupee, which India has adopted recently. He advocated birth control to develop the Indian economy, and this has been adopted by Indian government as national policy for family planning. He emphasized equal rights for women for economic development. Ambedkar's views on agricultural land was that too much of it was idle, or that it was not being utilized properly. He believed there was an ideal proportion of production factors that would allow agricultural land to be used most productively. To this end, he saw the large portion of people who lived on agriculture at the time as a major problem. Therefore, he advocated industrialization of the economy to allow these agricultural laborers to be of more use elsewhere. Ambedkar was trained as an economist, and was a professional economist until 1921, when he became a political leader. He wrote 3 scholarly books on economics, administration and finance of the East India Company, The Evolution of Provincial Finance in British India, The Problem of the Rupee, Its Origin and Its Solution. The Reserve Bank of India (RBI) was based on the ideas that Ambedkar presented to the Hilton Young Commission. Ambedkar's first wife Ramabai died in 1935 after a long illness. After completing the draft of India's constitution in the late 1940s, he suffered from lack of sleep, had neuropathic pain in his legs, and was taking insulin and homeopathic medicines. He went to Bombay for treatment, and there met Sharada Kabir, whom he married on the 15th of April 1948, at his home in New Delhi. Doctors recommended a companion who was a good cook and had medical knowledge to care for him. She adopted the name Savita Ambedkar and cared for him the rest of his life. Savita Ambedkar, who was called also Mai, died on May 29, 2003, aged 93 in Mumbai. Ambedkar considered converting to Sikhism, which encouraged opposition to oppression and so appealed to leaders of scheduled castes. But after meeting with Sikh leaders, he concluded that he might get second-rate Sikh status. Instead, around 1950, he began devoting his attention to Buddhism and traveled to Ceylon, now Sri Lanka, to attend a meeting of the World Fellowship of Buddhists. While dedicating a new Buddhist vihara near Pune, Ambedkar announced he was writing a book on Buddhism, and that when it was finished, he would formally convert to Buddhism. He twice visited Burma in 1954, the second time to attend the third conference of the World Fellowship of Buddhists in Rangoon. In 1955, he founded the Bharatiya Bauddha Mahasabha, or the Buddhist Society of India. In 1956, he completed his final work, The Buddha and His Dhamma, which was published posthumously. After meetings with the Sri Lanka Buddhist monk Hamalava Saddhatissa, Ambedkar organized a formal public ceremony for himself and his supporters in Nagpur on the 14th of October 1956. Accepting the 3 refuges and 5 precepts from a Buddhist monk in the traditional manner, Ambedkar completed his own conversion, along with his wife. He then proceeded to convert some 500,000 of his supporters who were gathered around him. He prescribed the 22 vows for these converts, after the 3 jewels and 5 precepts. He then traveled to Kathmandu, Nepal to attend the 4th World Buddhist Conference. His work on the Buddha or Karl Marx and revolution and counter-revolution in ancient India remained incomplete. Since 1948, Ambedkar had diabetes. He remained in bed from June to October in 1954 due to medication side effects and poor eyesight. His health worsened during 1955. 3 days after completing his final manuscript The Buddha and His Dhamma, Ambedkar died in his sleep on the 6th of December 1956 at his home in Delhi. A Buddhist cremation was organized at Dadar Chopatti beach on the 7th of December, attended by 500,000 grieving people. A conversion program was organized on the 16th of December 1956, so that cremation attendees were also converted to Buddhism at the same place. Ambedkar was survived by his second wife Savita Ambedkar, known as Masaheb Ambedkar, who died in 2003, and his son Yashwant Ambedkar, known as Bhayasaheb Ambedkar, who died in 1977. Savita and Yashwant carried on the socio-religious movement started by B.R. Ambedkar. Yashwant served as the second president of the Buddhist Society of India, 1957-1977, and a member of the Maharashtra Legislative Council, 1960-1966. Ambedkar's elder grandson, Prakash Yashwant Ambedkar, is the chief advisor of the Buddhist Society of India, leads the Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi and has served in both houses of the Indian Parliament. Ambedkar's younger grandson, Anandraj Ambedkar, leads the Republican Sena, TRAN, the Republican Army. A number of unfinished typescripts and handwritten drafts were found among Ambedkar's notes and papers and gradually made available. Among these were Waiting for a Visa, which probably dates from 1935 to 1936 and is an autobiographical work, and The Untouchables, or The Children of India's Ghetto, which refers to the census of 1951. A memorial for Ambedkar was established in his Delhi house at 26 Alipur Road. His birth date is celebrated as a public holiday known as Ambedkar Jayanti or Bhim Jayanti. He was posthumously awarded India's highest civilian honor, the Bharat Ratna, in 1990. On the anniversary of his birth and death, and on Dhamma Chakra Pravartan Din, the 14th of October, at Nagpur, at least 500,000 people gathered to pay homage to him at his memorial in Mumbai. Thousands of bookshops are set up, and books are sold. His message to his followers was, educate, agitate, organize.